What's good, y'all? Welcome back to Commissioner's Corner. Today we're going to be talking about my favorite targets that I'm targeting in basically all my leagues. We're going to be focusing on running backs and wide receivers today. I've seen this video popping around. I've seen people talking about their targets this early in the season, and a lot of them are just mentioning rookies. And that's the big reason why I'm making this, because there are more the players than just rookies. Rookies are just the safe bet, and it's the safe answer for experts to go to. Because, of course, rookies are going to get better from their first game to their last. We all know that. Target them in the trade market because of that. But we need to talk about those guys that are not just going to be the obvious rookies that are going to be better as the season goes on. We need to talk about those other people who will help you down the stretch, potentially win championships as you consolidate all your assets for a run in the playoffs. So enough yapping. Let's get into it. So the first player on my list is going to be a running back, and it's going to be expensive guy off rip. It's just a guy that I'm very high on as we go through the season, and I'm willing to trade up because I think his value is going to be a top 10 running back as we go forward, and that's going to be Chase Brown. So Chase Brown, there's not much that needs to be said. He's the only guy in this backfield. He ran the ball 21 times this last game, and yes, it was for an abysmal 43 yards, and his carries were 2.05 yards per carry. Yeah, that fucking sucks. But you should be able to get him a discount because of this, even though he got the touchdown, he got 3 targets, because I think his upside is so much higher. So he was on the field for 39 of Bengals' 52 snaps and had every rush attempt. That matters because the only other person that really took any workload in that backfield was Samaje Perine, who only had, 2 targets? That's all he did, no rushes, 2 targets. Chase Brown's utilization when he was on the field was 61.5%. Just to put that in a little bit of perspective, Derrick Henry last year led the league with 55%. He is the lone workhorse in this offense, and this offense is going to get a lot better as we go through the season. So he's a guy that I'm willing to try to trade for and move up in a tier. So let's just talk about a little bit these metrics a little bit. So last year after week 3, because once again, they start slow every single year with the Bengals because they do not play any of their starters in the preseason. He only had 1 game where he wasn't at least top 28, and he had 8 games that he was an RB1. So he'll never blow you away with his advanced metrics. They suck because of how bad that offensive line is, but they get into the red zone. He gets those opportunities. He gets targets. Yes, they're going to start a little slow. He might be a lot better next week, but week 1, he was slow. He is an elite athlete. Chase Brown is an extremely strong athlete who gets the PPR work. He's in a great offense, and he's a guy that I think you could trade, like a James Cook and move up a tier because someone might be a little down looking at the terrible box scores. Don't be someone who watches the box scores. What you need to be looking at while we're looking at these targets is basically their snap share, their utilization, and that's going to correlate more as we go into the season. So just quickly diving into the second running back I have on my list, it's going to be Alvin Kamara. We're going to slowly get to a couple guys that are a little bit easier to trade for. But Alvin Kamara is the next guy I want to talk about just because the potential he has in this offense with how bad they were to start the year. So the Saints had 75 offensive snaps. Kamara was out there for 79% of them. And he had only 11 rushes for 45 yards. He did get a touchdown, but he only got 2 targets. Because this was a little bit of an enigma type game where Spencer Rattler had 50 dropbacks. He passed the ball 47 times. And you're telling me Kamara only got 2 targets? Even Jawan Jennings got 11 targets. So we need to just think about that going forward because that's not going to be the normal as we go through. Because there's not going to be this situation where a guy plays almost 80% of snaps. He's been a career PPR beast, and he's only going to get 2 targets and no rushes. He's never going to get all the rushes in the offense, and this offense is not going to be very good, but his utilization in that first game was only 22%. So only on 22% of his snaps where he was playing did he either get handed the ball or was he targeted with the pass. Last year, his utilization was 49%. I don't know if he's going to get back up to 49%, but you could easily see him in that 40 to 45 range where now he's a locked-in RB2 for you. So I think he's a very easy target because people might be down on the offense. They might be down looking at his box scores, and they might freak out seeing only 2 receptions, but he's going to get back a little bit more to the norm. For every bad game like this, they start to push back to the medium, higher and lower before they hit that average. Even though he had a bad week 1, he has a really easy schedule for the rest of the season. And his playoff schedule starts very juicy. He plays my Carolina Panthers, who are probably the worst defense in the league right now, in week 15. So that's something I don't really care about too much right now, but something you need to think about in the future as we go forward. If you're 3-0 or whatever, and you want to target guys going into the playoffs potentially, this is a guy that I do want as my RB2. And right now, his value is a lot lower than it might be in a couple weeks when he starts to see a little more of that utilization, because they can't rely on Spencer Rattler to pass for 47 times in a game. Next up on the list is going to be Tony Pollard. He's just the workhorse in Tennessee. I don't know if y'all know, Tajay Spears, yes, he's on IR, and it doesn't have to do with IR. But did you know he doesn't have an ACL in one of his knees? That's absolutely insane. Of course, his IR injury is dealing with an ankle. I just thought that was a little bit of an interesting thing to see. Either way, the most important thing to think about this is he was injured coming into the pros. He hasn't been able to stay healthy while he's been on Tennessee. And we keep hearing over and over that this is going to be some type of split backfield, but Spears hasn't been able to play. It's the big reason we're starting to see Charbonnet pop off for Seattle, because Kenneth Walker can't stay on the field. Not like Tajay is a lot worse than Kenneth Walker. So Pollard is going to be this workhorse for the foreseeable future. He saw 89% of the offensive snaps, and only one other running back even saw a carry. So he's getting all the work in this offense, and it will get better. Like week 1, they played the Broncos. The Broncos are the best defense in the league. He had 18 carries for 60 yards. He had 1 catch. But you got to think about the offense around him a little bit. You have Cam Ward at quarterback. He's going to get better as the season progresses. Like a lot of quarterbacks start slow and they start to pick it up. Cam Ward was throwing to his number 1 option, Calvin Ridley, who had Surtain on him for 84% of his routes ran. There just wasn't much room for this offense to really work, so it just didn't look as efficient as it will in the future. Their schedule doesn't look amazing for the rest of the year, but with that workload, with Cam Ward getting a little bit more comfortable, and with that offense starting to gel a little bit, I see him being an RB2, and I think you can get him for almost like a flex price right now. So he's a guy that, even though I'm not as high on him now as I was during the draft process, I still think he's a value for the rest of the season. So last running back I want to talk about is Javonte Williams. Yes, we're going to be talking about a guy who just popped off for a top 5 RB finish in PPR, and his value might be a little inflated because of that. But I'm sort of thinking that it might not be too bad, just because unless they're a Cowboys fan, he was still drafted at a very low cost, and people still aren't very sure or very comfortable with him. So just talking about him a little bit, his production wasn't great, but he did get the 2 touchdowns this week. And I don't necessarily care about that part as much as I care about the usage that happened. So Javonte saw 15 carries, Miles Sanders saw 4. He was on the field for 77% of the snaps. Yes, when Jaden Blue comes back, but he's most likely missing at least 1 more week, he's going to lose a little bit of that snap share even more to Blue. But I mean, I'm not making a deal to get Javonte for a full season. I don't think he's great rest of season. What I think he's going to be great in is the first half of the season, which is what you want to target here. They play the Giants, Chicago, Green Bay, Jets, Carolina, and Washington. Not the toughest schedule going forward. So I think for the first half of the season, he's a guy who I'm sort of happy playing almost every week as my RB2. And once we get to, let me see, about week 8 or 9, right before his bye, when he starts to play the Broncos, he plays Atlanta right before the bye. Not Atlanta. He plays Arizona right before the bye. He's a guy that I'm just wanting to try to move off of then. So he's a guy that I'm sort of targeting for a small time period so I can have a guy who's a consistent RB2 that I feel very comfortable with. And then there's a clear point where I want to move off of him while his value is still high. And a lot of people don't look at the schedule for the rest of the year. It's something you need to look at. Let's be 100% fair, because like he's one of those guys. His first half of the year is gonna be easy. His second half of the season is gonna be very hard. But you will have a guy who's gonna have great numbers, and if they're just not paying much attention to the schedule second half of the year, you might be able to pull off some great value for him once you get to that point. But I think he's a great option for the first half of the year, which is why he's a guy who I'm trying to target just for a small span. He might be on someone's team who values him a lot, and that way stay away. I'm not going to pay too much for him since it's only a rental. But if you can get him for a rental price where you know he's a locked-in starter for you for a little while, you got to pull the trigger. So now we're done with running backs. I want to talk about wide receivers. So the first thing I want to say before I even get into the players is Wide receiver is such a deep position that the only thing I really care about, unless I'm in a league that has a very deep starting lineup, like we're talking about 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, the only thing I really care about, unless we're in that type of league, is basically their upside. Because you can get a lot of guys that are going to do very well, and you just look at a week-to-week matchup, just compare who their corner, like the corner that's going to be on them is, and you're going to feel comfortable going into it. But if you want those league-winning guys, you need to target for upside around that. So let's get into my first player. My first player is going to be Ricky Pearsall. I don't know if this is going to age very well. I made a part of this before I saw the news about Purdy, but I still think it's pretty true. Purdy's going to be out 2 to 5 weeks with a turf toe injury. That's not great. No one over there can stay healthy. But there's really no one else in this offense. You have CMC, Ricky Pearsall, and Juwan Jennings, who is limping still. So week 1, he had 4 catches on 7 targets, 108 yards, a great week 1 performance. And I think he'll have to be Mac Jones's security blanket a little bit going into the next week, because CMC can't handle that same utilization week after week after week. He's already had to miss a practice this week after having that 55% utilization. If he has like a 50% utilization or 45% utilization, that means they have to pass a little bit more, and there's not a whole lot of options to pass in. So week 1, Pearsall was wide receiver 20 in PPR, and that put him squarely in wide receiver 2 territory. I think he has like top 15 upside if things swing right for him. And I think he's worth it upside like type ask for different, like whoever they owns him, you should be asking them basically what their price is for him, because they might be a little bit down on him on this news, but I still think he's almost a locked-in wide receiver too, because there's just no one else, and he has the talent. And then once Purdy's back, you still feel a little more comfortable at being like a mid-wide receiver too. So you might be able to get value on him, especially right now with the injury. His floor right now is just a little bit lower than you might like, but his ceiling is still there. So now onto a player I'm a little more comfortable with going for the rest of the season. That's going to be Calvin Ridley. I mean, he had 4 catches on 8 targets. He only had 27 yards. It was a nightmare week 1. They played the Broncos, as I said earlier, and you have to really think about when you talk about these receivers, who their cornerback is. Like, that is a very important thing in fantasy, because if they have a guy like Patrick Surtain, who is on Calvin Ridley for 84% of the snaps, you're not going to perform very well, because Surtain just knocks out every receiver he's on. And this year, it looks like they're wanting to shift him around onto the wide receiver 1 on a more consistent basis, because last year they sort of kept him on one side of the field. So week 1, we saw that happen, and he just shut down Ridley. But we're talking about the best corner in the league. It's only going to get a little bit better as we go forward, because Ward's going to feel more comfortable. Ridley's not going to have this matchup every week. If I'm being totally honest, in the leagues that I had Ridley, I did not start him this last week because of that Surtain matchup. Like, there was a league that I started Eckler over him just because I knew what Eckler's going to do for me. I had a feeling Ridley was just going to do absolutely nothing. And you sort of have to think about when you talk about these matchups week to week. But Calvin Ridley has a lot of upside. I'm seeing him being pushed down very low onto expert boards. He was very high during the preseason process, and week 1 shouldn't have changed anything because we knew who he was going to go against. I was on, and this is going to be to show, I'm not trying to put any shade anywhere on this, but I was on Flock Fantasy's website a little bit earlier today, and he's ranked 65 now. I know he was higher than that before week 1, and he's basically the same ranking as Jalen Waddle. Are you really telling me that he has the same value as Jalen Waddle when Jalen Waddle really can't stay healthy and Tua can barely throw, and that offense looked miserable last week against the Colts? When we have Calvin Ridley, who's a locked-in wide receiver 1 for the Titans, and Ward's only get better, and their play styles still mesh. It's not like their play styles don't mesh. Ward likes to throw deep. Ridley was one of the best people when catching the deep ball last year. It just is very easy for me to see him swinging up to a lot easier to play. Like, I have him as a wide receiver 2 this week. I think he's going to break out as the season goes on, as Ward gets more comfortable with things. We should not overreact to week 1, which I think a lot of people are overreacting to week 1. So this is probably like the guy that if I don't have him, because I genuinely have him in most of my leagues, he would be the guy that I'm trying to target the most. All right, the last 2 players I'm going to talk about, I'm going to sort of talk about them together because they are on the same team. It's going to be Rashee Rice and Hollywood Brown. So the big reason I'm talking about both these guys is because of the Xavier Worthy injury. Xavier Worthy has a dislocated shoulder. He's going to be out at least 2-3 weeks. I'm guessing probably 3 or 4. Then he's going to have a brace, and he's not going to be fully healthy for the rest of the season. And I was reading online from a couple different doctors on Twitter that they basically said that it's a 50% re-aggravation rate for this type of injury. So we're talking about a guy who is going to come back in 3 or 4 weeks. He's going to play with a brace, so he's going to be limited. And then he has a 50% chance to re-aggravate the injury, or there might just be a chance where he just doesn't feel right and just does the surgery. So I don't feel very confident that Worthy's going to play that much the rest of the year. So these are two guys that I'm very interested in. So talking about Rashee Rice first, he's going to be out another 5 weeks. But this isn't because of injury, it's because of the suspension. So he's going to come in, and I think he's going to make waves immediately, because it's going to be him, Hollywood Brown, and Kelce. That's it. On an offense that wants to pass absolutely like crazy. So week 1, Mahomes passed for 47 times, and it was only on 61 offensive snaps on a pretty neutral game script. So it's a team that wants to pass the ball a lot. They were saying it all preseason, and they did it week 1. They might end up rushing a little more, but once Rashee's right and back, I see them passing 40 plus times a week. I would not be shocked. So if Worthy's not really playing, I wouldn't be shocked to see Rashee Rice getting 11, 12, 13, 14 targets. If Worthy is playing in a limited role, maybe Rashee's still getting 8, 9, 10 targets, but that's enough for me to at least want him as my wide receiver 2 with wide receiver 1 upside, because he was doing this before the injury, before the suspension. Why do we think he's not going to do it now? And the reason I'm talking about targeting him is because I don't think people are necessarily thinking yet about what's going to happen when he gets off his suspension. They might think about that 3 weeks from now, and they're going to be very high on them in 3 weeks from now. But as of today, I don't think many people are thinking about the fact that this offense might just be him, Hollywood Brown, and Kelce in a very pass-heavy scheme, and an offense that's going to be good. He's a guy that I'm targeting in every single one of my leagues if I don't have him, because I just think it's the only time you're able to get value for him, and you might be able to trade a wide receiver 3 for him right now, depending on the situation on the team that has him. But let's talk about the flip side here. Hollywood Brown. Hollywood Brown, I don't think is going to have end of season upside. He's just going to be absolutely fantastic for the next 3 to 5 weeks. He had 11 catches this last game on 16 targets. It was like a 40% market share. I don't think that's going to be a fluke, because when we look at Mahomes through his career, what he's like to do is he's not a guy who's like Jordan Love, who passes to 7 different receivers in 7 different plays. He's a guy who sort of funnels to his guys that he trusts. It's going to be Kelce and Hollywood Brown for the next 3 to 5 weeks. I don't think anyone else is going to get that much work. So if you need to win some games early on, which I think is very important to get into a comfortable position to where you can start being a little riskier or start looking to the end of the season, Hollywood Brown is a great option, because I'm not sure how he's going to get valued in a lot of leagues. He might be costlier than he should be, but if he's a guy that's going to give you potential week winning upside for 3 to 5 weeks, I think it's worth it to at least ask. It's worth it to try to get him in a trade, because you know when to trade off of him. He might still have value when you trade him. He's going to get you some wins while he's still here, because he's going to get a large target share just because no one else is available. So these are two guys that I'm very high on. I would probably target Rashee over Hollywood, because I like the end of season upside, especially because I'm in a bunch of leagues where my mentality at this point is I'm 1-0 and I'm starting to try to look to the future. But even when you're 0-1, target Rashee. If you feel like your team's not great and you need a couple wins before you start to do some risky things, target Hollywood Brown. These are two guys that I think are going to have major upside, one in the first half of the season, one in the second half of the season, that should be guys you are asking about at the very least. So that's going to wrap us up on guys that I'm very high on. I just wanted to make a video once again that wasn't just talking about rookies, because rookies are too safe. I know some of these feel safe. I just want to get people, if anyone's watching, thinking about potential ideas on how you can just make little improvements to your roster as we go through the season, especially as we start to, I know it's early in the season, but especially as we start to look at the fantasy playoffs, because that's going to matter at some point. Because at the end of the day, if you have a good team and you end up squeaking into the playoffs and you lose in the first round, if you're in a money league, are you really getting paid for it? Do you really have bragging rights for it? No. You want to make it deeper than that. So you want to try to put yourself in a position where you're targeting guys who have good rest of season value or league winning value going into the playoffs. So that is what I wanted to try to at least talk about, to get people thinking about going into their leagues. So I'm going to wrap it up there. Hope y'all enjoyed. I really enjoyed making this video. I had a lot of fun making the script for everything. But if you liked, please like the video, please subscribe, please comment. I know I'm still talking to the void. I know there's no one really coming to my videos, but this was a lot of fun. And if you are watching, thank you so much. Hope to catch you next time. Peace.